Hello, I'm Peter. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. Before we begin, I want you to know something. Right now, wherever you are in the world, you're safe. You're warm. You have blankets, maybe a heater humming somewhere nearby. You have walls that don't let the wind through. You have a door that closes. But there was a time when none of this was guaranteed. In fact, your body remembers that time better than your mind does. Have you ever wondered why, when a sudden draft hits you, your skin ripples with goosebumps? That isn't just a reaction. It is a ghost reflex. It is the tiny muscles in your skin desperately trying to fluff up a coat of fur you lost thousands of years ago. It is your DNA screaming a silent warning from the past. The cold is coming. Tonight, we're traveling back to medieval times, to the long winters when darkness fell at 4 in the afternoon and didn't lift until 8 the next morning. To a world where survival wasn't about comfort, but about making it through one more night, where every scrap of warmth mattered, where fire was hope made visible. Erase the fantasy. No firelit taverns. No warm hearths. The medieval winter was something else entirely. Something colder. We're exploring the raw truth of survival insulation made of filth-sharing beds with beasts, and the desperate struggle to keep a flame alive. Before you get too comfortable, please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Ready? Dim the lights. Get settled. Let me tell you about the cold. The wind knows your name in winter. It finds every crack in the walls, every gap between door and frame. It slides through like a living thing searching for the warmth of your body, the heat of your breath. And in medieval times, in those long centuries between the fall of Rome and the dawn of the Renaissance, winter wasn't just a season. It was a test. And to pass this test, you needed more than just wood and wool. You needed a mindset that we have largely lost. You see, in medieval times, winter changed the very geography of their world. When the snow fell, deep, heavy drifts that could bury a man to his waist, the familiar paths vanished. The world became a blank white page where landmarks were erased. A simple trip to the neighbor's house, usually a 5-minute walk, became a life-threatening expedition. This isolation transformed the psychology of the medieval village. It shrank their universe down to the radius of the firelight. It turned the outside world into a place of myth and monsters. Because when you can't see the path, the mind invents things in the shadows. We know now that the monsters were often just wolves, driven mad by hunger or the disorienting effects of hypothermia. But to the medieval peasant, the winter wind wasn't just air moving from high pressure to low pressure. It was the breath of giants. It was the wild hunt riding across the sky. Picture it with me now. It's January in the year 1314. The sun has set hours ago, and the darkness is absolute in ways we can barely imagine today. No streetlights, no electric glow bleeding through curtains, no headlights sweeping across ceilings. Just darkness so complete that you could hold your hand an inch from your face and see nothing but the faint outline of your fingers against a slightly less dark sky. You're in a medieval village somewhere in England. Let's say Warham Percy in Yorkshire. It's a real place, abandoned now. But in our time tonight, it's alive with 40 families, maybe 200 souls, all huddled in their homes as the temperature drops below freezing. The ground outside is iron hard. The well water has a skin of ice that needs to be broken each morning with a wooden mallet. The trees stand bare and black against the night sky, their branches clicking together in the wind like bones. Inside one of these homes, our home for tonight, there's a different kind of darkness. Warmer, gentler. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket if you know its secrets. This is where survival lives. In the space between the killing cold outside and the fragile warmth within. And the people who lived here, the medieval peasants who have become ghosts in our history books, they were masters of this in-between space. They had to be, because winter didn't ask permission. It came every year without fail, and it took the weak and the unprepared. But it didn't take everyone. Some survived, some even thrived. And tonight we're going to understand how. We're going to feel what they felt, know what they knew, learn the winter survival skills that kept humanity alive through centuries of cold that would break us if we faced it today without our modern comforts. So breathe with me now, slow and steady. Feel your own warmth, your own safety. And as you drift closer to sleep, we'll drift back through time, back to a winter that never truly ends in memory, back to the coldest nights the medieval world had to offer. The fire is burning low, the wind is rising, and we have a long night ahead of us. The door closes behind you with a soft thud, and immediately the world changes. You're inside now. Inside what historians call a longhouse, though that's too grand a word for what you're looking at. This is a peasant home in medieval England. One room, maybe 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. Earthen floor packed hard from years of feet walking the same paths. Walls made of wattle and daub, that ancient technique that turns sticks and mud into shelter. Let me tell you about these walls, because they're more remarkable than they seem. The frame is oak. Good English oak cut from the Lord's forest. With permission, 1 tree per family, maybe a privilege earned through years of service. The carpenters of medieval life knew how to read. Wood knew which timbers would hold weight and which would warp. They built the skeleton of this house to last, and some of these frames stood for 200 years or more. Between the oak posts, they wove a lattice of hazel branches. Hazel is flexible, see? You can bend it without breaking. They wove it like a basket over and under, creating a tight mesh that would hold the daub. And the daub. Oh, the daub. This is where medieval ingenuity really shows. It's not just mud. That's what most people think, but they're wrong. The daub is a carefully mixed composite material that would make a modern engineer nod with respect. Clay from the riverbank, sand for stability, straw for tensile strength acting like the rebar in modern concrete, water to make it workable. And then here's the part that surprises people: animal dung. Cow dung usually, sometimes horse, mixed right in. The dung serves 2 purposes. First, it's a natural adhesive, all those plant fibers partially digested, but still intact, creating a web of organic polymer that binds everything together. Second, when it dries, it has insulating properties. It traps air pockets. It resists water. It turns a simple mud wall into something that can keep you alive. There is a fascinating bit of chemistry happening here that the medieval builders understood intuitively, even if they couldn't write down the chemical formula. As the organic matter in the daub, the straw and the dung, begins to decompose over the years, it actually undergoes a very slow, low-grade exothermic reaction. It's the same principle as a compost pile heating up in the center. Your walls aren't just blocking the wind. In a very microscopic, subtle way, they are generating a faint pulse of heat. It's not enough to warm your hands on, but in the thermal equation of a winter survival skill, every single calorie of heat counts. And there's a smell too. You might expect it to smell like a barn, and it does, but there's also a scent of ammonia. This is practical, not just poor hygiene. Urine was a precious chemical resource in medieval life, used for tanning, leather fixing, dye in cloth, and yes, cleaning. The ammonia sharpness cuts through the wood smoke, a reminder that in this world, nothing is waste. Everything is a resource. Even the filth has a function. They slathered this mixture onto the woven hazel frame, working it in with their hands, smoothing it, building it up 3 or 4 inches thick. Then they let it dry. And when it dried, it became hard, stone hard. A medieval peasant's wall could take a blow from a hammer and barely crack. But here's what matters for winter survival: these walls breathe. They're porous enough to let moisture escape, which prevents the interior from becoming damp and moldy, but tight enough to block the wind. And that's crucial, because in medieval times, it's not the cold that kills you, it's the wind. Wind strips away your body heat. Wind finds every opening. Wind is the enemy. These walls stop the wind. Look up now in your mind's eye. Look at the ceiling. There isn't one. Not really. Just the underside of the thatched roof. Bundles of reed or straw laid thick, a foot deep, maybe lashed to the rafters with cordage made from twisted grass or hemp. No chimney pierces this roof. Chimneys are for castles, for manor houses, for people with stone and wealth. Far away in the stone manor house on the hill, the lord's family sleeps beside a roaring fireplace with a proper chimney. But they will never know the quiet comfort you know tonight, the feeling of 8 hearts beating in the same small space, keeping each other alive. Some kinds of warmth only the poor ever truly understand. Here in the medieval village, smoke does what smoke has always done. It rises. It rises from the central hearth, that circle of stones in the middle of the floor where the fire burns. It rises and spreads and finds its way out through the thatch, slowly, lazily staining the underside of the roof, black and glossy with creosote, preserving the straw, killing the insects that might nest there. Your eyes adjust to the gloom. There's firelight flickering and orange painting, everything in shades of amber and shadow. That's your only light source. No candles, those are expensive. No oil lamps, the oil costs too much. Just fire. The floor beneath your feet is earthen, but it's been covered with a layer of fresh straw. Clean straw brought in specially for winter. It provides a tiny bit of insulation between your feet and the frozen ground below. It rustles when you walk. It smells sweet and dry. Around the walls, you can make out simple furniture. A table, just planks laid across trestles. Some 3-legged stools carved from single pieces of wood, sturdy and squat. A chest in the corner, oak banded with iron, where the family keeps their few valuables, tools, maybe a Sunday tunic seed grain for spring planting. And along one wall, raised up on a platform, maybe a foot off the ground, the sleeping area. More straw piled thick. Some wool blankets, scratchy and smelling of lanolin and cheap. Maybe a linen sheet if this is a prosperous family, though linen is dear. This is home. This is where you'll spend the next 12 hours from sunset to sunrise, trying to stay warm enough to survive until morning. But you're not alone. There are 8 people in this house. John and Alice, the husband and wife. Their 4 children ranging from little Tom, who's just 3 winters old, to Margaret, who's 12 and nearly grown. Alice's mother, old Agnes, bent with age, but still sharp of mind. And John's younger brother William, who helps with the farming and has no wife yet. 8 people sharing 300 square feet of space. Sharing breath, sharing warmth, sharing life. And that's not all. In the far corner, separated from the living area by a low wattle fence, there are animals. 2 cows lying down in the straw, chewing their cud with that endless, patient rhythm. 6 chickens roosting on a beam. A pig fat and grunting softly in its sleep. Medieval peasants brought their most valuable livestock inside during winter. Not out of sentiment, though they were fond of their animals. Out of survival. These animals are biological heaters. Each cow produces about as much heat as a small space heater, around 1500 watts. Their body temperature is higher than ours, around 101 degrees Fahrenheit, and all that heat radiates out into the air. The chickens help too, bundled together on their roost, their small bodies generating warmth. Even the pig contributes. Without these animals, the temperature inside this house might hover just above freezing on a January night. With them, it might reach 45 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Still cold by our standards. Cold enough that your breath makes clouds, but survivable. Warm enough that your body can maintain its core temperature without burning through all its reserves. This is the habitat. This is the night shelter. This is where medieval peasants lived through winters that killed hundreds of thousands of their neighbors. Simple, cramped, smoky, drafty despite the best efforts of the daub, but alive, still alive. Holding warmth like a cupped hand holds water carefully, knowing that if you let it slip through your fingers, you'll never get it back. Outside, the wind is building. You can hear it now, even through the thick walls. It starts as a low moan in the distance, then grows closer, stronger, until it's rattling the shutters and finding every tiny crack in the wattle and daub. This is a winter wind in Northern Europe during what historians call the Little Ice Age. The year is 1315 now in our journey. The medieval warm period that allowed population expansion across Europe is ending. The climate is shifting. Glaciers in the Alps are advancing. The Baltic Sea is freezing over more frequently, and winters are becoming brutal in ways that will define this century. The temperature outside right now is probably around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 20 degrees below freezing. But it's not the temperature that makes it deadly. It's the wind chill. Wind chill is a concept they didn't have words for in medieval times, but they understood it in their bones. They knew that a still cold night was one thing. A windy, cold night was death on the move. Modern science tells us that at 15 degrees with a 20-mile-per-hour wind, the wind chill drops to -5 Fahrenheit. Exposed skin can develop frostbite in 30 minutes. Core body temperature begins to drop if you're not moving, not generating heat through work. The medieval peasants didn't know about wind chill factors or heat transfer coefficients. But they knew this. If you had to go outside on a night like tonight, you wrapped yourself in every layer of wool you owned, you covered your face with a cloth, and you moved fast. You did what you needed to do, and you got back inside. Because staying out meant dying. Inside this house, the physics of survival are playing out in ways that are actually quite sophisticated. Heat, you see, moves in three ways: conduction, convection, and radiation. The medieval peasants didn't know these words, but they built their whole winter strategy around managing these forces. Conduction is heat moving through direct contact. When you touch something cold, heat flows from your warm hand into the cold object. This is why the medieval peasants covered their floor with straw. It creates a layer of insulation trapping air between the stalks, slowing down the conductive heat loss from their feet to the frozen earth below. It's also why they never sat directly on the ground, always on stools, always with a barrier between themselves and the cold. Convection is heat moving through air or liquid. Hot air rises, cold air sinks. This creates current circulation drafts, and drafts steal heat from your body faster than you can generate it. The wattle and daub walls, imperfect as they are, do something clever here. They're not airtight. No medieval building is airtight. But they break up the airflow. They turn fast-moving wind into slow-moving drafts. They reduce convective heat loss to a manageable level. And here's something beautiful. The smoke from the fire actually helps. As it rises and circulates through the roof space, it warms the underside of the thatch. That creates a thermal mass up above, radiating heat back down into the living space. It's inefficient, yes. Most of the heat goes up and out, but some of it, maybe 10 or 15%, gets reflected back. Let's talk about the smoke for a moment. Modern lungs would struggle here. We are used to scrubbed, filtered air. But the medieval peasant possessed a different biology, hardened by generations of exposure. Their lungs were coated with a layer of carbon, a permanent internal tattoo of every winter they had survived. But this smoke served a hidden purpose. It was a preservative. Just as smoke cures a ham hanging in the rafters, preventing it from rotting, the constant presence of wood smoke in the house acted as a mild fumigant. It discouraged the rats. It kept the populations of lice and fleas, though never fully eliminated, from exploding into a plague. It coated the timbers of the roof in creosote, waterproofing them against the melting snow. The house itself was being cured, hardened, and preserved by the very thing that made the residents cough in their sleep. It is a harsh trade-off: respiratory health for structural integrity and pest control. But in the calculus of medieval survival, you choose the cough over the freezing rain every single time. Radiation is heat moving through electromagnetic waves. It's how the sun warms your face even on a cold day. It's how the fire warms this room. The central hearth is positioned perfectly for radiant heating. It's in the middle of the floor, so its heat radiates out 360 degrees. Everyone can gather around it. Everyone benefits. There are no cold corners because the fire is equidistant from all the walls. The fire itself is a small miracle of medieval engineering. It's built on a base of flat stones, carefully chosen for their ability to absorb and hold heat without cracking. River stones would explode in fire, so they use limestone or sandstone patient stones that heat slowly and cool slowly. The fuel is precious. In January, in the deep part of winter, you can't just go cut wood. Everything is frozen, so the wood you're burning tonight was gathered last summer. Deadfall mostly from the edges of the Lord's forest. Peasants weren't allowed to cut living trees, but they could collect fallen branches, dead standing snags, anything that had already died. They learned to choose their fuel wisely. Oak burns hot and long. Ash burns clean and doesn't need to season as much as other woods. Birch bark makes excellent kindling. Apple wood from the orchard smells sweet and burns steady. Tonight they're burning a mixture. Some oak logs as a base providing steady heat. Some ash split into smaller pieces for quick flames. And they're using peat too, cut from the bog last summer and dried in stacks. Peat doesn't burn hot, but it burns forever, smouldering through the night, giving off a distinctive earthy smell. The fire is never allowed to go out in winter. Never. Because starting a fire from scratch is hard work. You'd need a bow drill or a flint and steel, and in the cold with numb fingers, it might take an hour to coax a flame from sparks and tinder. An hour of cold, precious warmth lost. So they bank the fire at night, cover the coals with ash, creating a layer of insulation. The coals underneath continue to smolder very slowly, consuming oxygen so sparingly that they'll last until morning. Then, before dawn, someone will scrape away the ash-add kindling blow gently and bring the fire back to life. This knowledge, this firekeeping, is passed down through generations. Children learn it before they can read or write. Because fire means life. Fire means warmth. Fire means survival. Let's talk about the temperature gradient in this room. It's not even. Heat isn't distributed equally. Closest to the fire, at about 3 feet away, it might be 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Comfortable. You can feel the heat on your face. At the walls, 15 feet away, it might be 35 degrees. Cold enough that your breath hangs in the air. Up near the roof, where the smoke gathers, it might be 50 degrees warm, but caustic to breathe. Down near the floor, away from the fire, it might be just above freezing. The medieval peasants know this temperature map by instinct. They position themselves accordingly. The old and the young, who have the hardest time regulating their body temperature, get the spots closest to the fire. The able-bodied adults take the colder positions. Everyone contributes body heat to the collective warmth. This is survival physics in practice. Every BTU of heat conserved. Every draft blocked. Every trick of insulation and position employed. Because the cold outside doesn't stop. It presses against the walls like a physical weight. It seeps through gaps. It settles in corners like water filling a pool. And the only thing standing between this family and freezing to death in their sleep is knowledge. Knowledge passed down through 500 generations of humans who survived winter before them. Listen to the wind now. It's reaching its peak. The shutters rattle. A draft finds a crack near the door and sends the flames dancing. Little Tom whimpers in his sleep, and his mother draws him closer. This is the reality of medieval life. This is the coldest night. This is where winter survival skills mean the difference between seeing spring and becoming a statistic in the church records. Died of cold January 1315. But they're not dying tonight. They're surviving. They're warm enough. They're alive. And tomorrow the sun will rise and they'll do it all over again. Sleep in the medieval village is not like sleep in our time. There are no mattresses, no box springs or memory foam or pillows carefully selected for optimal neck support. There is straw and wool and the warmth of other bodies. That's all. But it's enough. It has to be enough. The sleeping platform along the wall is raised about a foot off the ground. This is crucial. Remember our physics from earlier cold air sinks. The coldest air in the room pools at floor level like invisible water. By raising the sleeping area, they're lifting themselves out of that cold pool into slightly warmer air. The platform itself is made of rough-cut planks laid across beams. nothing fancy. But on top of those planks, they've piled straw. Fresh straw changed maybe once a month, if they're prosperous enough. The straw does several things at once. First, it creates millions of tiny air pockets. Air is an excellent insulator. That's how all insulation works, really. Whether it's modern fiberglass or medieval straw, you're trapping air to prevent heat transfer. Each hollow straw stem is a miniature insulation tube. Second, the straw conforms to your body shape. It's not comfortable in the way we think of comfort, but it distributes your weight. It keeps you off the hard wooden planks. After a day of labor in the fields of hauling water and splitting wood and feeding animals, any surface that lets you lie down is a gift. Third, and this might surprise you, the straw generates a tiny amount of heat as it compresses and breaks down. Organic materials in decay produce heat. Not much, maybe a degree or two. But in a world where every degree matters, even that helps. On top of the straw, there are blankets. Wool blankets woven by the women of the village on their looms. The sheep were sheared last summer. The wool was cleaned, carded, spun into thread, and woven into fabric. These blankets represent hundreds of hours of labor. They're treasured. They're essential. Wool has a property that synthetic materials struggle to match. It can absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture before it feels wet, and even when damp, it still insulates. That's crucial in a world without central heating, where condensation from breath and bodies can make everything clammy. The wool still smells of lanolin, that waxy substance that coats sheep fleece. The peasants don't wash their wool completely clean. They leave some lanolin in because it repels water and adds softness. It has a distinctive smell, not unpleasant, earthy and animal and real. Some families have linen sheets too, if they're fortunate. Linen is expensive, grown from flax that could otherwise be turned into valuable linseed oil. But linen against the skin is softer than wool, and it's easier to wash when it gets soiled. The wealthier peasants, the ones with larger holdings, might have a linen sheet to lay between their bodies and the wool blanket. Now, here's where the sleeping arrangements get interesting, and where medieval life differs most sharply from our modern sensibilities. Everyone sleeps together. All 8 people in this household share this one sleeping platform. They lie side by side, fitting together like puzzle pieces, conserving heat through shared body warmth. This is called communal sleeping, and it was the norm for the vast majority of humans throughout history. John and Alice in the middle, with 3-year-old Tom between them. Margaret and her siblings on one side. Old Agnes and William on the other. Sometimes they sleep head to toe to fit better. Sometimes children sleep at their parents' feet. The arrangements shift based on who's coldest, who's sick, who needs extra warmth. There's no privacy, no personal space. The concept of privacy is mostly a modern invention born from prosperity. When survival is at stake, when the temperature is dropping and the wind is rising, you crowd together. You share heat, you survive. The human body is a furnace. Each adult produces about 100 watts of heat, like a bright incandescent light bulb. A child produces less, maybe 50 watts. 8 people together generate over 600 watts of continuous heat. That's significant. That's survivable. They sleep in their clothes mostly. Stripping naked would mean losing all that insulation from their layers of wool and linen. They might remove their outer tunics to use as extra blankets, but the underlayers stay on. Some families sleep in their shoes if it's cold enough. though that's uncomfortable and usually avoided. The wool clothing continues to work even while they sleep. Let's look closer at this clothing, because it is a marvel of low-tech engineering. The layer next to the skin is linen derived from flax. It acts as a wick, pulling sweat away from the body, so you don't get that clammy cold feeling that leads to hypothermia. Over that, the wool. But not just any wool. The outer tunics were often fulled. Fulling is a process where the woven cloth is beaten, sometimes with feet, sometimes with hammers, in a mixture of water and clay until the fibers fell together, closing up the gaps in the weave. A fulled wool tunic is essentially windproof. It's the medieval equivalent of a modern Gore-Tex shell, and on their heads, this is the most critical winter survival skill of all, the hood, the chaperone. It wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a personal microclimate. By trapping the heat rising from your shoulders and neck, a good wool hood could raise your perceived body temperature by 10 degrees. You slept in it. You worked in it. You might only take it off to wash your hair, which happened perhaps twice a year. In a drafty house, that hood is the difference between a stiff neck and a restful night. Each fiber is crimped and overlapping, creating thousands of tiny air pockets. The weave of the fabric traps more air, layer upon layer of trapped air, all warmed by body heat, creating a microclimate around each person. But here's something that might keep you awake if you think about it too much: fleas. The straw bedding, the wool clothing that rarely gets washed, their animal warmth from the livestock. Just feet away, all of this creates perfect habitat for fleas, and lice, and bedbugs. Medieval peasants are itchy, constantly. Scratching is just part of life. They try to manage it. Some families change their straw bedding frequently. Some use strong-smelling herbs like pennyroyal or tansy tucked into the bedding because folk wisdom says the smell repels insects. Some comb their hair with fine-toothed combs, trying to catch the lice. This grooming process, picking lice from a family member's hair, sounds repulsive to us. But let's reframe it. In a world without television, without books, without electricity, this grooming was a primary form of social bonding. It is what anthropologists call allo-grooming. Primates do it. We do it. Sitting by the fire, combing your daughter's hair, checking your husband's tunic seams for bugs. This was intimacy. It was care. It released endorphins. In the dim light, the rhythm of the comb and the warmth of the fire created a meditative state. It was a time for gossip, for storytelling, for teaching riddles. What has a mouth but cannot speak? A river. What runs but has no legs? Water. These quiet, itchy hours were the schoolroom of the medieval peasant. It's where culture was transmitted one louse at a time. But mostly they just live with it. They endure. They accept that this is the price of survival. Clean versus cold. They choose warmth. The sleep itself comes in shifts. This is another aspect of medieval life that's foreign to us. The idea of sleeping straight through for 8 hours is modern, tied to electric lighting and climate control. In medieval times, people practiced what historians call segmented sleep or biphasic sleep. You'd sleep for 3 or 4 hours after dark. Then you'd wake up, stay awake for an hour or two in the middle of the night, then sleep again until dawn. During that middle of the night waking period, people would tend the fire check on the animals, pray talk quietly with their spouse, maybe conceive children. It was called the watching hour, or the first waking. Historical records are full of references to it. prayer books had special prayers for this time. Doctors wrote about the best activities for this wakeful period. For John, the head of this household, the watching hour is when he adds more fuel to the fire, carefully placing a few pieces of oak on the coals, making sure the fire won't die before morning. It's when he checks the door, making sure it's secured against the wind. It's when he listens to the breathing of his family, counting them unconsciously, making sure everyone is warm enough, alive enough. For Alice, it's when she checks on little Tom, feeling his forehead for fever, adjusting his blanket. It's when she might nurse the baby if there was a younger infant, though Tom is past that age now. It's when she might lie awake and worry about the spring planting, about whether they'll have enough seed grain, about whether her father's cough is getting worse. The darkness during this watching hour is absolute. The fire has been banked, giving off only the faintest red glow. No moon tonight, and even if there was, the shutters are closed tight against the cold. The darkness is so complete that it has presence-weight texture. You could reach out and touch it. In this darkness, sounds become amplified. The wheeze of old Agnes breathing, the rustling of straw as someone shifts position, the creak of settling timbers, the patient chewing of the cows, the wind outside, always the wind. And then, after an hour or maybe two, sleep comes again, heavier this time, deeper. The body has warmed the bedding, found its comfortable position despite the discomfort. The mind has settled. The watching hour has passed. This is medieval sleep, not the unconscious oblivion we chase with blackout curtains and white noise machines. Something lighter, more alert, more connected to the rhythms of fire and darkness and cold. They sleep the way humans slept for thousands of years, before electricity changed everything. In shifts, in groups, always partially aware of danger of cold, of the need to survive until morning. And they do survive, night after night, winter after winter, through cold that would kill us in our modern softness. They survive because they know how to sleep in the cold, how to share warmth, how to make it through the watching hour and wake up alive when dawn finally breaks. The wind is quieter now. The fire glows steady. 8 people breathe in rhythm on their platform of straw and wool. They're surviving. They're sleeping. They're still here. Before sleep can come, before bodies can settle into the straw and wool, there is work to be done. Even in the depths of January, even when darkness has fallen at 4 in the afternoon and the temperature outside would kill you in hours, there are routines that must be followed. These routines are survival condensed into habit. They're the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 winters passed down from parent to child, grandmother to granddaughter. Skip them and you might not wake up. Follow them and you give yourself a chance at seeing spring. The evening meal comes first, taken just after sunset, while there's still enough firelight to see your food. The food itself is simple. Tonight, like most nights, it's pottage. That's a thick stew, almost a porridge, really made from whatever's available. The base is usually grain oats or barley dried from last summer's harvest, stored in sealed casks to keep out the mice. Add water from the well. Add onions and leeks from the root cellar, those hardy vegetables that can survive storage through winter. Maybe some dried peas or beans. A bit of salted pork if it's a feast day, though meat is rare. The pottage cooks in an iron pot hung over the fire on a tripod. It's been cooking since morning, actually, just simmering away, thickening slowly. Alice adds more grain when it gets thin, more water when it gets too thick. It's a continuous process, this pot. Some families keep a pot going for days, just adding to it, eating from it a never-ending cycle of food. By evening, the pottage is thick enough to eat with wooden spoons, or more commonly with bread trenchers. These are thick slices of bread that serve as plates. You put a scoop of pottage on your bread trencher, eat them together. The bread soaks up the liquid, becomes flavorful, fills your belly. The meal is eaten gathered around the fire, everyone getting their portion in order of importance. John first, as head of household and primary labourer. Then William the brother. Then the older children. Alice and Agnes eat last, and little Tom eats from his mother's trencher, picking at the bits he likes. They eat in relative silence. Conversation is minimal, not from unfriendliness, but from cold. Talking means opening your mouth, breathing in cold air, losing heat. Better to eat quickly, fill your stomach. Let the hot food warm you from inside. Because here's something about winter survival that people don't realize: digestion produces heat. Your body burns calories to process food, and that metabolic process generates warmth. A full stomach before sleep is literal insulation. It gives your body fuel to burn through the cold night. Medieval peasants understood this instinctively. They ate their largest meal of the day in the evening before sleep. They filled their bellies with starchy, caloric food. They didn't count calories or worry about their figures. They worried about surviving until morning. There is a biological phenomenon happening here that science calls seasonal metabolic plasticity. Studies of indigenous populations living in extreme cold suggest that the human body, when exposed to the rhythms of a medieval winter, actually shifts gears. The thyroid changes its hormone output. The body produces more brown fat, a special type of fat tissue that is dense with mitochondria and generates heat, directly burning calories to keep you warm rather than storing them. John and Alice don't know about mitochondria. They just know that in winter their hunger changes. They crave fat. They crave the sweet pudding, the dripping from the roasted meat. Their bodies are trying to become furnaces. And the winter sleep helps this. By spending 14 hours a day in darkness, largely inactive, they are putting themselves into a state of semi-hibernation, conserving energy, so that every scrap of food goes towards body heat, not movement. It is a slow-motion survival mode governed by the tilt of the earth and the chemistry of the blood. After the meal comes the animal care. The cows need to be checked. They're lying down now, comfortable in their straw bedding behind the low fence. But John walks over anyway, running his hands over their flanks, feeling for swelling or heat that might indicate sickness. A sick cow in winter is a disaster. The cow gives milk, that precious protein source. The cow will pull the plough come spring. We should pause to appreciate the cow. Let's call her Bruna. Most peasant families named their animals. They were co-workers, not just food. Bruna is a marvel of bioengineering. She is a ruminant, which means she possesses a fermentation tank inside her body. As she chews that dry, lackluster hay, the microbes in her rumen are breaking it down, and this fermentation process releases a tremendous amount of heat. She is literally a walking, mooing radiator. If you were to press your hand against her flank, you would feel a heat that seems impossible given the freezing air. And the family uses this. On the absolute coldest nights, it was not unheard of for the smallest children to be sent to sleep in the manger, nestled right up against the cow's belly. It sounds like a nativity scene, but it was practical thermal management. Bruna is the warmest thing in the village. She is the engine that keeps the barn, and by extension, the house, from freezing solid. The cow is wealth and survival combined. He makes sure they have enough hay in their manger. The hay is last summer's grass cut and dried and stored in the barn, doled out carefully through winter. Each cow gets maybe 20 pounds of hay per day. Not enough to maintain their weight, really. Most medieval cattle lost condition over winter and had to be fattened up again in spring, but enough to keep them alive and producing some milk. The chickens have already roosted for the night, clucking softly to themselves on their beam. They need no care until morning. The pig is settled in its corner, breathing heavily in sleep. Pigs are hardy. They can tolerate cold better than you'd think. Their fat insulates them. They're fine. Next comes banking the fire. This is a crucial skill, a precise art. Too much ash and the fire goes out completely. Too little and it burns through too fast, consuming your precious fuel. John uses a wooden tool almost like a hoe to scrape ash from the edges of the fire pit over the glowing coals. He doesn't cover them completely. He leaves some airflow, some oxygen reaching the embers. The coals glow red underneath, visible through the layer of grey ash. Perfect. When the ash settles over the coals, a faint, comforting smell rises. Part wood smoke, part warm earth, part the sweetness of last summer's applewood still clinging to the logs. It's the smell every child in this village falls asleep to. It means the fire will live. We will live. The ash acts as insulation, the same principle as the straw in the bedding. It slows down combustion without stopping it entirely. The coals will smoulder like this for hours, barely consuming any fuel but staying alive. Come morning, they'll be ready to spring back to flame with just a bit of kindling and some gentle blowing. While John tends the fire, Alice is checking the door. There's no lock, not really. Locks are for nobility. But there's a heavy wooden bar that drops into brackets, sealing the door shut. More importantly, she's checking for drafts. She can feel them with her hand-cold air, sneaking in around the edges of the doorframe. She takes some of the old straw from the bedding straw that's been compressed and matted and isn't good for sleeping anymore, and she stuffs it into the gaps, pushing it tight into the crack between door and frame, between threshold and floor. Every gap sealed is heat conserved. Old Agnes is wrapping the youngest children in extra wool. Little Tom gets his own small blanket tucked around him like a cocoon. The older children can fend for themselves somewhat, but the youngest need extra care. Their bodies are small. They lose heat faster. They're vulnerable. The older children have their own bedtime routine. Margaret helps her grandmother check that all the cooking implements are cleaned and stored. Wooden spoons hung on pegs. The iron pot scraped clean and left by the fire to dry. The bread trenchers either eaten or set aside for tomorrow's chickens. Margaret's brother, 9-year-old Robert, makes one last check of the animals. He's learning responsibility, learning the routines he'll need to know when he's head of his own household someday. He counts the chickens on their roost, 6 all present. He makes sure the pig hasn't knocked over its water trough. He pats the nearest cow on her warm flank, feeling her solidity, her life. William John's brother is at the shutters. These are simple wooden panels that cover the window openings. There's no glass. Glass is unimaginably expensive. But the shutters can be opened during the day for light and air, then closed at night for warmth. He checks that they're secure, that the wooden pegs holding them closed haven't worked loose. He feels for drafts around the edges. Like Alice, with the door he stuffs any gaps with straw or old rags. In a harsh wind, these shutters will rattle all night. But they'll hold. They'll keep most of the cold out. And then there's the water situation. This is tricky. You need water through the night for drinking for emergencies. But water freezes, so they keep a small jug near the fire close enough to the heat that it won't freeze far enough that it won't get knocked into the flames. It's a careful balance. Some families keep a chamber pot for night use, so no one has to go outside in the dark and cold to relieve themselves. It's emptied in the morning, usually into the midden heap behind the house. Not glamorous, but practical. Others, especially. The men will simply step outside, briefly take care of business, and hurry back in. The cold air hitting your lungs, the shock of going from 40-degree warmth to 15-degree cold, it wakes you up completely. You do what you need to do as fast as humanly possible and get back inside. Before the family settles for sleep, there's prayer. This isn't optional. This is as essential as banking the fire. Religion permeates every aspect of medieval life, and nowhere more so than in the evening when darkness falls and cold presses in. John leads the prayer speaking in English, not Latin. That's for priests. He knows the Lord's Prayer by heart and some Ave Marias. The family joins in their voices soft in the darkness. They pray for protection through the night. They pray for warmth. They pray for the health of their animals. They pray for good weather tomorrow. They also pray to specific saints. Saint Martin, patron of the poor. St. George, protector of England. Saint Blaise, who watches over livestock. The saints are real to them, present listening. They're intermediaries between humanity and God. And in the depths of a medieval winter, you need all the help you can get. The prayers are comforting. They're familiar. They connect this small family to the larger community of Christianity, to the church in the village centre, to the great cathedrals being built in distant cities. They're a reminder that they're not alone in the dark. After prayer comes the final settling. Each person finds their spot on the sleeping platform, some shifting, some adjusting. A child complains about someone's elbow in their back. Old Agnes needs help lying down her joints, stiff from age and cold. Alice nurses Tom one more time, even though he's almost weaned just for the comfort of it. The sounds begin to soften. The scraping of movement in straw, the rustling of wool, breaths slowing, bodies relaxing into sleep. The fire glows under its blanket of ash. The wind finds the cracks it always finds but doesn't get through. The livestock settle deeper into their own rest. The darkness is absolute, but no longer threatening. They've done everything right, every routine followed, every precaution taken, every trick of medieval winter survival skill employed. They're as safe as they can be, they're as warm as they can manage, and now, finally, blessedly, they can sleep. The darkness has a presence in medieval times that we've forgotten how to feel. Complete darkness. Absolute darkness. The kind that existed before humans invented ways to push it back. Before gas lamps and electric bulbs and LED screens. Before we conquered the night and made it just another version of day. In this small house, in this medieval village, in the year 1315, the darkness is thick. You could almost reach out and touch it. It has weight and texture. It's not just the absence of light. It's a thing unto itself. The fire is banked, now covered with ash, giving off only the faintest red glow. That glow doesn't illuminate anything. It's just a promise that fire still exists, that it hasn't gone out that come morning it can be coaxed back to life. But for seeing, it's useless. Your eyes adjust after about 30 minutes of darkness. The rods in your retina, those photoreceptor cells that detect light, they become more sensitive. You start to see gradations of black. The deep velvet black of the thatched roof overhead, the slightly lighter black of the walls, the almost visible outline of a person if they move against the faint glow of the banked fire. But you can't see faces. You can't see expressions. You can't read or write or do handwork. Darkness is fundamentally disabling in ways we've forgotten. So what do you do with darkness? Medieval peasants learned to inhabit it. They learned to exist in it without fear, without the desperate need to push it away that modern humans feel when the lights go out. The darkness becomes a time for other senses. It also becomes a time for the other world. In medieval folklore, the barrier between the living and the dead, the human and the fae, was thought to be thinnest in winter. The long nights belonged to the spirits. This is why they tell stories. The fairy tales we know today, Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, were born in these dark, cold nights. And if you listen to them closely, they are all survival guides. Don't go into the woods alone. Don't trust strangers who offer candy when you are starving. Listen to your parents. These weren't just fantasies. They were warnings wrapped in entertainment. The monsters in the stories were metaphors for the real dangers wolves' famine getting lost in the snow. By telling these scary stories in the safety of the warm bed, the medieval peasant was inoculating their children against fear. They were teaching them that yes, the woods are dark and full of teeth, but if you are smart and brave and stick together, you can make it home. For sound, for touch, for the internal landscape of thought and prayer and imagination. Listen now. In the darkness, hearing becomes acute. You can hear things you'd never notice in daylight or firelight. The breathing of 7 other people, each with their own rhythm. John's breath is deep and slow. William's has a slight whistle to it, air moving through his nose. Old Agnes wheezes a bit, her lungs, not what they used to be. Little Tom makes small sounds in his sleep, dream noises unconscious and innocent. You can hear the livestock. The cows breathe like bellows, massive and regular. One of them shifts her weight, and the straw rustles under her like distant rain. The chickens click and murmur on their roost, those soft comfort sounds that chickens make when they're content and safe. The pig's breath is rhythmic and surprisingly loud, a living presence in the darkness. Outside the wind, always the wind. It's not howling now, but it's there, a constant pressure against the walls, testing for weaknesses, looking for a way in. You can hear it find gaps you didn't know existed. A whistle here, a draft there. It's like the night itself is breathing. And beneath all of this, beneath the biological sounds and the weather sounds, there's a deeper quiet. The quiet of earth and stone and wood. The quiet of a world without motors or engines or humming electricity. A quiet so profound that it has its own quality, its own character. This quiet can be terrifying if you let it be. It can make you feel small and vulnerable and alone. Or it can be comforting. It can make you feel held, contained, part of something larger than yourself. Medieval peasants lived with this quiet every night. They grew up with it. They knew it like they knew the taste of bread or the smell of wood smoke. And they filled it with their own meaning. Fear lives in the darkness too. Not fear of the dark itself necessarily, but fear of what the dark represents. Fear of winter, fear of illness, fear of death. These aren't abstract fears. They're immediate and real. Medieval life is precarious. Child mortality is staggering. Roughly half of all children die before age 5. Disease is a constant threat. There's no antibiotics, no vaccines, no modern medicine. A simple infection can kill you. A bad winter can starve you. Old Agnes, lying there in the darkness, has already buried 3 of her children, all dead before age 10. 1 from fever, 1 from a fall that went bad, 1 from something the village simply called the wasting. Probably tuberculosis or cancer, but they didn't know. She's outlived her husband by 12 years now. She's seen famine and plenty sickness, and health, life and death more times than most modern people could bear. She prays in the darkness. Not formal prayers, not the ones from church, just talking to God in her head, bargaining, pleading, thanking. She's lived 70 winters. That's remarkable in medieval England. That's ancient. She knows her time is limited. She's cold more often now, tired more easily. She wonders in the darkness how many more winters she has. Will this be her last? John the father has his own fears. He worries about the spring planting. They're into January now, and that means spring is coming. But it also means they're running low on everything. The grain stores are dwindling. They've butchered 1 pig already for winter meat. The second one needs to last until spring. The cows are thin, their milk production dropping, and there's a deeper worry. The harvest last summer was poor. Too much rain. The grain rotted in the fields. Everyone in the village is worried. Everyone is rationing. This is 1815. John doesn't know it yet, but he's living at the beginning of the Great Famine, a catastrophic crop failure that will kill millions across Europe over the next 2 years. But tonight, in the darkness, he just feels a gnawing anxiety, a sense that things are precarious, that survival is never guaranteed, that he has to keep working, keep planning, keep his family alive through whatever comes. Alice, the mother, her fears are more immediate. Tom, the youngest, had a fever last week. It passed, but it scared her. Every cough, every wheeze, every flush of hot skin might be the start of something that can't be stopped. She keeps her hand on his small body as she lies there in the dark, feeling him breathe, counting his breaths, like counting coins, treasuring each one. The older children have their own interior worlds in the darkness. Margaret at 12 is on the edge of womanhood. She'll probably be married within a year or 2. That's exciting and terrifying. She'll leave this house, leave her family, go to live with a husband she might barely know. She'll have children of her own. She'll become a woman like her mother, worn down by work and childbirth and the endless grind of survival. In the darkness, she thinks about these things. She imagines her future. She wonders what it will feel like to have her own house, her own children, her own responsibilities. Part of her wants it desperately. Part of her wants to stay a child forever safe under her mother's protection. Robert, 9 years old, doesn't worry so much. Children are better at living in the moment. He's uncomfortable though. His stomach is never quite full anymore. He's always a little bit hungry. His body is growing, needing calories, but there's not quite enough food to go around. He shifts in the straw, trying to find warmth, trying to get comfortable. His father's back is against his side, solid and warm. His older sister's foot is somehow wedged against his leg. He can smell the faint scent of the pig from across the room and the sharper smell of cow dung from the animal section. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar. It's home. And little Tom, 3 years old, experiences the darkness differently. For him, it's not frightening. His mother is right there. Her warmth, her smell, her presence. As long as she's there, everything is safe. Everything is right. He doesn't worry about famines or marriages or death. He just exists, tucked against her warmth, drifting in and out of sleep. But there's more than fear in the darkness. There's also companionship, solidarity, the knowledge that you're not alone. 8 people breathing together. 8 people sharing warmth. 8 people surviving the cold night as a unit, as a family. There's comfort in that, even in a time when privacy doesn't exist, when personal space is a luxury. There's deep psychological comfort in the closeness. Touch becomes important in the darkness. Not sexual touch necessarily, though that exists too in its time and place. But the simple touch of skin-on-skin hand-holding hand-child curled against parent. Touch releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It reduces stress. It makes the darkness less frightening. The medieval peasants touch each other constantly in these sleeping arrangements. It's not even conscious. A hand on a shoulder, a foot against a leg. Bodies pressed together for warmth. This constant physical connection is part of what keeps them sane, keeps them human through the long, dark winters. And there's a strange beauty to it if you can step back and see it. 8 people who have nothing in material terms. No wealth, no luxury, no security beyond what they can create with their own hands. But they have each other. They have the warmth of shared breath and shared life. They have the bonds of family and village and community. In a world that would kill them individually, they survive collectively. The darkness doesn't defeat them because they face it together. This is the psychological landscape of a medieval winter night. Fear and comfort intertwined. Darkness and warmth. Individual anxiety and collective survival. It's not comfortable in any modern sense. It's hard and cold and precarious, but it's also deeply human. It's the way our ancestors lived for countless generations. It's the way humanity survived before we invented ways to hold back the night. And in this small house, in this particular night in January 1315, they're doing what humans have always done. They're enduring. They're comforting each other. They're making it through the darkness one breath at a time. The wind picks up outside. Someone coughs in the darkness. A cow shifts position. The banked fire glows red beneath its ash covering. They're still here, still alive, still together, and that's enough. In the spring of 1315, it began to rain. Not the gentle spring rains that medieval farmers prayed for, the kind that soaked into the soil and made the seeds swell with life. This was something else. This was rain that fell without stopping, day after day, week after week, turning the fields into swamps and the roads into rivers. It rained through April. It rained through May. By June, when the sun should have been warming the earth and drying the grain, it was still raining. Cold, relentless, catastrophic rain. This is the beginning of what historians call the Great Famine of 1315-1317. And the family we've been spending the night with, John and Alice and their children. They're about to live through the worst subsistence crisis medieval Europe has ever seen. Let me put this in context for you. Remember earlier I mentioned the medieval warm period from roughly 950 to 1250. Europe experienced unusually favorable weather. Temperatures were warmer, growing seasons were longer. The population exploded from about 35 million to 80 million people. But that growth had a cost. By 1300, Europe was overpopulated relative to its agricultural capacity. Every piece of arable land was being farmed. Forests had been cleared for fields. Marginal land slopes and poor soil that should never have been cultivated was being ploughed anyway because people needed food. The system was stretched to its absolute limit. There was no slack, no buffer, no margin for error. And then the climate shifted. Sometime around 1300, the medieval warm period ended. Glaciers in the Alps began to advance. The Baltic Sea froze over more frequently. Growing seasons shortened. And then came 1315. The rain that spring wasn't just bad luck. It was a symptom of a larger climatic shift that would last for centuries, a period we now call the Little Ice Age. The jet stream had shifted south, bringing cold, wet weather to northern Europe. And the medieval agricultural system, already stretched thin, couldn't handle it. When it rains that much in spring, you can't plough. The oxen sink into the mud. The wooden ploughs get stuck. The farmers try anyway, desperate, wading through fields that are more like marshes, but it's futile. Even if you manage to plant your seed, it rots in the waterlogged soil before it can germinate. Or if it does sprout, the constant moisture leads to fungal diseases that destroy the crop. Or the young plants simply drown, unable to survive in soil with no oxygen. The harvest of 1315 was a disaster. In some regions, farmers got back less seed than they'd planted. The ratio that should have been 5-1 or 6-1, meaning 6 bushels harvested for every bushel planted, dropped to 2-1, or 1-1, or less. That means there's not enough grain to feed people. And worse, there's not enough grain to save for seed for next year's planting. The system is eating itself. By winter of 1315, the winter we've been experiencing tonight with John and Alice, people are starting to get hungry. Not, I skipped lunch, hungry. Genuinely, dangerously malnourished. The pottage pot is thinner. The bread trenchers are smaller. Children cry with hunger pangs that won't stop. And then it rains again in 1316. Another failed harvest, 2 years in a row. The death toll is staggering. Historians estimate that 10 to 15% of the population died during the Great Famine. That's millions of people. In some regions, especially in urban areas, where people couldn't grow their own food, the mortality rate reached 25%. People died of starvation directly. Their bodies consumed their own muscle and fat reserves. Their immune systems shut down. They became vulnerable to any infection, any illness. A simple cold became pneumonia, became death. People died of diseases that took advantage of weakened, malnourished populations. Typhus spread through crowded, unsanitary conditions. Dysentery from contaminated water killed thousands, and people died from the social breakdown that famine causes. There are documented cases of cannibalism during the Great Famine. Parents eating children, the starving eating the recently dead. It's horrifying. It's the ultimate breakdown of civilization when hunger drives people to break the most fundamental taboos. Villages were abandoned, fields went unplanted, markets shut down because there was nothing to sell. The entire social fabric of medieval Europe frayed and tore. In the house where we've spent the night, John and Alice are facing this reality. It's January 1316 now. They survived 1315 barely, but they can see what's coming. The grain stores that should last until March will be empty by February. The second pig will have to be butchered soon. The cows are producing almost no milk because there's not enough hay to feed them properly. Margaret, the 12-year-old daughter, is showing signs of malnutrition. Her hair is thin. Her skin has a greyish cast. She's tired all the time. Alice knows these signs. She's seen them in other famines, though never this bad. Margaret needs more food, but there is no more food. Little Tom, the 3-year-old, cries often now. He's hungry. He doesn't understand why his belly hurts, why the pottage tastes like water, why there's never quite enough. His growth has stopped. His development is being stunted by lack of nutrition. Old Agnes knows she's expendable. She's 70 years old. She's lived a full life. When the food runs low, she takes smaller portions. She gives her share to the children. She doesn't say anything about it, but everyone knows. This is how the old survive famines, by choosing not to. The psychological impact is as devastating as the physical. The world has become unpredictable. Hunger is a constant companion. Hope feels like a luxury you can't afford. Medieval people understood that God controlled the weather, that these catastrophes were divine judgment, or at least divine will. So when the rain wouldn't stop and the crops wouldn't grow, it felt like abandonment, like God had turned his face away from humanity. The church tried to help. Monasteries opened their stores feeding people until their own supplies ran low. Bishops called for special prayers and processions. But prayer doesn't stop rain. Faith doesn't fill empty bellies. And yet, somehow, people survived. Not everyone. Not even most people in the hardest hit areas. But enough. Humanity endured. The population of Europe dropped significantly, but it didn't collapse completely. John and Alice made it through, though we don't know how specifically. Maybe they had hidden stores. Maybe they foraged more intensively, eating things they normally wouldn't: tree bark, grass roots, anything with calories. There is a grim reality to this foraging that we often overlook. They called it the hungry gap. That terrible stretch between the time the winter stores ran out and the first green shoots of spring appeared. In desperation, they turned to the famine foods. Acorns could be ground into flour if you leached the tannins out with water. A bitter, gritty bread, but it filled the belly. Nettle soup, rich in iron, harvested the moment the stingers poked through the snow. Even the inner bark of pine trees, rich in vitamin C, could be dried and ground. It tastes like turpentine and wood dust, but it keeps the scurvy away. This is the extreme edge of medieval life, where the knowledge of the hedgerow witch and the village herbalist becomes more valuable than gold. Knowing which mushroom kills you and which one keeps you alive for one more day is the ultimate winter survival skill. It is a knowledge written in the stomach cramps of ancestors who learned the hard way. Maybe they sold something valuable, a tool or a piece of cloth to buy a little grain. Maybe they just got lucky. By 1317, the rain finally stopped. The growing season of 1317 wasn't great, but it was better. The harvest was poor but survivable. The famine began to ease. People started to rebuild. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 changed medieval Europe. It showed the vulnerability of the agricultural system. It weakened the population just in time for the Black Death to arrive 3 decades later and kill a third of everyone left alive. It marked the end of the population boom and the beginning of a more precarious time. But it also showed resilience. Human beings pushed to the absolute edge of survival found ways to endure. They adapted. They helped each other when they could. They survived. The family in our house, the one we've been with all night, they're part of that survival. They're making it through the coldest night of the worst winter in the worst famine of the medieval period. And come morning, they'll get up and do it again. Because that's what humans do. We survive. We endure. We make it through the darkness to see another dawn. The rain has stopped for now. It's winter, so it's snow instead. But spring will come, and with spring, the rain will return. The cycle will continue. The struggle will go on. But tonight, right now, in this moment, they're alive. They're together. They're warm enough. And that has to be enough. Cold has shaped civilizations in ways we rarely stop to consider. As we lie here, in the darkness of this medieval peasant home, warm under wool and straw, let me take you on a journey through time and across continents. Let me show you how different peoples, different cultures, different moments in history have faced the same fundamental challenge. How do you survive when winter wants to kill you? Because the medieval English peasants we've been with tonight, they're not unique in their struggle. They're part of a larger human story, a story written in shivering flesh and banked fires and desperate innovation. Let me tell you about 3 other cold nights separated by centuries and oceans, but connected by the universal truth that winter survival is never guaranteed. The Tower Cell, London, 1536. Jump forward. With me now, about 200 years from our peasant cottage. We're still in England, but now we're in London, in the Tower, in a cold stone cell that smells of damp and fear. A woman sits here tonight. Her name is Anne Boleyn. She was Queen of England until 2 days ago. Now she's a condemned traitor waiting for execution. It's May, technically spring, but the Tower is always cold. Stone doesn't care about seasons. It holds cold like it holds prisoners relentlessly. Anne has one small window with iron bars. No glass, no shutter. The river wind comes straight in. She has a wool cloak. She has a small brazier with a few coals. She has her pride somehow still intact despite everything. But she doesn't have freedom. She doesn't have hope, and she doesn't have warmth, not really. Anne Boleyn changed England. Her refusal to become Henry VIII's mistress, her insistence on marriage, triggered the English Reformation. Henry broke with Rome to marry her. He created the Church of England to make her his queen. She bore Elizabeth, who would become the greatest monarch England ever saw. But tonight, in this cold cell, none of that matters. She's just a woman waiting to die. And she's cold. In the secret ceremony on January 25th, 1533, in the pre-dawn darkness at Whitehall Palace, when she married Henry, did she imagine this end? Could she have known that the warmth of a king's love could turn so quickly to the cold of a cell? They say she was calm before her execution, composed. She made a careful speech on the scaffold praising the king, even as he prepared to murder her. Some historians think she was innocent of the charges adultery, incest, treason. Others aren't sure. But innocent or guilty, she died cold and alone. What does Anne Boleyn have to do with our medieval peasants? Everything. Because she shows us that cold and danger don't just affect the poor. That winter's grip, literal or metaphorical, reaches everyone. That survival is never guaranteed, whether you're a peasant in a cottage or a queen in a tower. Both Anne and our peasant family, Alice, understood something fundamental in the cold. You make choices. You endure. You wrap yourself in whatever warmth you can find, whether that's wool blankets or royal dignity. And you survive until morning, or you don't. Boston Harbor, December 6th, 1773. Now travel with me across the Atlantic. We're in Boston, Massachusetts, Bay Colony, nearly 500 years after our medieval night, 240 years after Anne's death. It's December, and it's cold. Not as cold as England tonight, maybe, but cold enough. The harbour water is like ice, though it hasn't frozen yet. The wind comes off the ocean with teeth in it. 3 ships sit at anchor, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, the Beaver. They're loaded with tea from the British East India Company. 342 chests of it. The colonial government says it has to be unloaded and the tax paid. The Sons of Liberty say absolutely not. Tonight, December 16th, the confrontation reaches its climax. Men gather at the Old South Meeting House in the afternoon. Thousands of them. They've been debating for weeks. Samuel Adams, that master of political theatre, has been orchestrating this moment carefully. When word comes that the governor refuses to let the ships leave without unloading, Adams says the famous words, "This meeting can do nothing more to save the country." It's a signal, prearranged. And suddenly men are streaming out of the meeting house, whooping and hollering. Some are disguised as Mohawk Indians, a political statement about American identity. They have hatchets and knives. They're heading for the docks. The night is cold. The kind of cold that makes your fingers clumsy and your breath hang in clouds. The men board the ships in organized groups. There's no violence against people. This is precision political theatre, not a riot. They haul the tea chests up from the holds, 342 of them. They split them open with hatchets, and then methodically they dump the tea into the harbour. It takes 3 hours. Imagine standing on the dock that night. The cold wind, the splash of tea hitting water, the smell of harbour and tea mixing, the absolute discipline of it. Nothing else is damaged. No other cargo is touched. This is protest, not piracy. What does the Boston Tea Party have to do with our medieval peasants, or Anne Boleyn everything? Because it's about survival too. Not immediate physical survival against cold and hunger, but survival of an idea. The idea that taxation without representation is tyranny, that people have rights that governments must respect, that sometimes you have to risk everything, even on a cold December night, for principles. The men who dumped that tea were risking death. The British response was swift and harsh. The coercive acts, which Bostonians called the intolerable acts. The port was closed. The government was taken over. British troops occupied the city. It led directly to the American Revolution. But on that cold night in December, they made their stand. They endured the cold and the risk, because some things matter more than comfort. Some things matter more than safety. Just like our medieval peasants enduring January cold for the chance to see spring. Just like Anne Boleyn maintaining her dignity in a cold cell because that's all she had left. The Corral Desert, Peru, circa 2600 BCE. One more journey. This one takes us back in time further than any other and across the world to a place where cold means something different. We're in the Super Valley of Peru, about 120 miles north of modern Lima. The year is impossible to specify exactly, but it's around 2600 BCE. That's nearly 5,000 years ago. It's older than the Egyptian pyramids at Giza. It's contemporary with Mesopotamian city-states. It's the oldest civilization in the Americas. The city is called Corral. It's not cold here like England or Boston. The Andes foothills have a different kind of cold. Desert nights. The temperature can drop 40 degrees between sunset and sunrise. The air is thin and dry. Your lips crack. Your skin feels like paper. But the people of Corral have solved the cold in their own way. They build sunken, circular plazas, amphitheaters, really where warm air collects during the day and stays through the night. They orient their pyramids to catch and hold solar heat. They weave cotton textiles layer upon layer, creating insulation against the desert chill. What's remarkable about corral is what's missing. There are no walls, no weapons, no evidence of warfare at all. While other civilizations were conquering and killing, corral was building and trading. They grew cotton in the valley and traded it to coastal fishing communities who needed it for nets. In return, they got fish and shellfish protein for their diet. It was a peaceful, symbiotic relationship that lasted over 1,000 years. Archaeologists have found flutes made from pelican bones at corral, musical instruments. They found evidence of complex rituals and ceremonies. They found pyramids that required sophisticated engineering and massive coordination of labor. But no weapons, no fortifications, no evidence of violence. Imagine that. A civilization that survived through cooperation instead of conflict. That endured the cold desert nights and the uncertainty of agriculture and the challenges of building massive stone structures, all without resorting to war. It ended probably because of climate change. Around 1800 BCE, the region entered a severe drought. The rivers that fed corral's agriculture dried up. The people had to leave. But they took their knowledge with them. Their descendants would build other civilizations, Chavin, Moche, Inca. The thread of Peruvian culture stretches back to corral unbroken. What does corral have to do with our medieval peasants, with Anne Boleyn, with Boston Patriots, everything? Because corral shows us that survival doesn't always look like struggle, that humans can endure harsh conditions through cooperation and innovation rather than conquest. That civilization isn't inevitable, but when it does emerge, it can take forms we don't expect. The thread that connects. It connects us to the biology of our own bodies too. You see, you listening to this right now, you are the genetic result of this struggle. Your metabolism, your ability to shiver the way your blood vessels constrict in your fingers to shunt warm blood to your vital organs. These are gifts from ancestors who survived the freeze. If you have ever felt that sudden sharp pain in your forehead when you eat ice cream, brain freeze, that is a survival reflex. Your body thinks your brain is freezing and sends a rush of warm blood to the head, expanding the arteries and causing pain. It's a mechanism designed for a medieval peasant falling into a frozen pond, repurposed for your modern dessert. We carry the ghosts of the Ice Age and the Little Ice Age in our very physiology. We are built for cold. We have just forgotten because we live in an eternal thermostat-controlled summer. 4 cold nights, 4 moments of human endurance. Medieval England, Tudor London revolutionary. Boston, ancient Peru. Separated by time and geography, but connected by something essential. They're all about humans facing a world that doesn't care whether they survive. They're all about finding warmth, literal or metaphorical, in the face of cold. They're all about community and individual choice, and the delicate balance between endurance and collapse. Our medieval peasants, huddled in their cottage, survive through community. 8 people sharing warmth, a village sharing resources, knowledge passed down through generations. Anne Boleyn, alone in her cell, survives through dignity, through maintaining her sense of self even when everything else has been taken. She doesn't survive physically, but her legacy does through her daughter Elizabeth. The Boston Patriots survive through collective action, through standing together for principles even when it's cold and dangerous, and the outcome is uncertain. The people of Caral survived for 1,000 years through peaceful cooperation, through innovation in irrigation and architecture and social organization, until the climate shifted and they couldn't anymore. What can we learn from these 4 nights? What wisdom carries forward to us, lying here in our comfortable beds, safe from cold and hunger and danger? Maybe this, that survival has always required community. That warmth, whether physical or spiritual, comes from connection to others. That humans are resilient beyond measure when we work together. Maybe this, that cold is a test, but it's not the final word. Spring always comes, whether that spring is literal or metaphorical. New growth follows winter. Hope persists. Maybe this, that the things we do on cold nights, the choices we make when survival is at stake, those shape the future in ways we can't predict. The medieval peasants who survived 1315 had children who eventually crossed the Atlantic and built new worlds. Anne Boleyn's daughter ruled England for 45 years and shaped the modern world. The Boston Patriots started a revolution that changed human history. The people of Caral left a legacy of peaceful civilization that still inspires. Or maybe the lesson is simpler. Maybe it's just this: humans endure. We find ways. We make it through the cold night. We survive. And that's beautiful. That's worth celebrating. That's worth remembering on nights when we're warm and safe, and the challenges of medieval peasants or queens in towers or revolutionary patriots or ancient city builders seem impossibly distant. We come from survivors. Everyone reading this, everyone listening to this, you descend from people who made it through countless cold nights, who found warmth when it seemed impossible, who endured when endurance was all that was left. Their strength is in you. Their resilience is your inheritance. So as you drift towards sleep, as the warmth of your own bed embraces you, take a moment to honor those who came before, the ones who survived the Great Famine, the ones who faced the executioner with dignity, the ones who dumped tea in Boston Harbor, the ones who built pyramids in the desert. They're your ancestors in spirit, if not in blood. And their story is your story too. The cold night passes. Morning always comes. Survival continues. And we're still here. The arrangement of bodies in the darkness is not random. Every family develops their own system, their own hierarchy of warmth refined over years of cold winters and trial and error. In our house tonight, the sleeping platform holds 8 people, and they're positioned with the precision of pieces in a puzzle. Each spot chosen for maximum efficiency, for optimal heat distribution, for the survival of the most vulnerable. John lies on the outer edge closest to the door. This is the coldest position, the most exposed to drafts and the chill that creeps in from outside. But John is a grown man in his prime, 35 years old, strong from farm labor. His body generates the most heat. He can afford to sacrifice comfort for the sake of others. His back creates a barrier between the cold and his family. His body heat, substantial as it is, helps warm the air around him before it reaches the others. He's a human windbreak, and he accepts this role without question. This is what fathers do, what husbands do. You take the cold position so your children don't have to. Next to John lies little Tom, the 3-year-old. He's nestled against his father's chest, tucked into the warmth of John's body. Tom is the most vulnerable member of the family right now. His small body loses heat quickly. His immune system is still developing. He needs maximum warmth to survive the night. Against Tom's other side lies Alice, the mother. She's warm too, though not as warm as John. Her body is efficient at conserving heat after years of manual labor and childbirth. She radiates steady, reliable warmth. And more than that, she provides comfort. When Tom stirs in the night, when he whimpers with hunger or cold, Alice is there. Her presence, her touch, her smell, all of these soothe him back to sleep. This arrangement, Tom between his parents, is called the family sandwich in some historical accounts. The child is insulated by adult warmth on both sides. It's efficient. It works. Beyond Alice lies Margaret, the 12-year-old daughter. She's at an awkward age for sleeping arrangements. Too old to need constant parental contact, but not yet fully grown. She's thin, undernourished from the famine conditions. She gets cold easily, so she presses against her mother's back, stealing warmth, borrowing heat. Margaret shares a wool blanket with her two younger siblings, Robert and little Emma. The three of them create their own heat cluster. Robert, 9 years old, lies back to back with his sister. Emma, 7, curls into Margaret's front, seeking warmth and protection. Their combined body heat creates a warm pocket under the shared blanket. This sibling cluster is important. It teaches social skills. It creates bonds. Children who survive cold winters together develop relationships that last a lifetime. They learn to share space, to compromise, to keep each other warm. These are lessons that go beyond physical survival. They're about social survival too. At the far edge of the sleeping platform lies old Agnes and William John's younger brother. This pairing might seem odd, but it makes sense in the context of medieval sleeping arrangements. Agnes is 70 frail, losing heat faster than she generates it. William is 25 vigorous, producing heat like a furnace. He lies next to Agnes, deliberately sharing his warmth with her, helping her maintain her body temperature through the night. This isn't romantic or sexual. It's practical care for an elder family member. William knows that Agnes's survival depends on warmth. He provides it. It's his contribution to the family's welfare. And Agnes, in return, provides wisdom and experience, and an extra pair of hands for tasks that don't require physical strength. Between these two, though, there's also the subtlest hint of community boundary. William is the edge. Beyond him is the wall, and beyond the wall is the world. He's the last line of defense, the final barrier between the family unit and the cold. The livestock play their role too. The 2 cows lie on the other side of the low fence, maybe 10 feet from the sleeping platform. Their body heat radiates across the space, raising the ambient temperature several degrees. You can hear them breathing that deep, regular sound. You can smell them, that warm animal smell of hide and hay and manure. The presence of the animals is comforting in its own way. They're alive. They're warm. They're a reminder that the family isn't alone in fighting the cold. Even the livestock contribute to survival. The chickens on their roost overhead don't add much heat individually, but 6 chickens together make a difference. And their presence, the soft clucking sounds they make even in sleep, the sense of having living creatures all around it, creates psychological warmth as well as physical. The pig in its corner is its own heat island. Pigs are surprisingly intelligent sleepers. Observations of heritage breeds, the the closest living relatives to medieval livestock, show that pigs will construct elaborate nests. If given the chance, a pig will drag straw twigs and even old cloth into a pile, fluffing it up with its snout to create an insulated mound. In the peasant house, the pig is not just lying on the floor. It has likely created a cozy depression in the dirt, lined with the driest straw it could steal from the cow. This pig, let's call him Bacon, a dark medieval joke perhaps, but a realistic one, is the smartest thermal engineer in the room. He knows that the ground sucks heat, so he builds a barrier. He knows that drafts kill, so he burrows deep. In the hierarchy of the room, the pig is often more comfortable than the humans. And there is a symbiotic element here too. The pigs were often fed the warm whey left over from cheese making. They acted as a disposal unit for warm, wet waste that would otherwise freeze and create a sanitation hazard. Bacon is a composter, a heater, and a pantry, all wrapped in bristles. Pigs are amazing heat generators when they're fattened for winter. This pig might weigh 200 pounds, and all of that mass is generating thermal energy. It's not close enough to the family to share that heat directly, but it warms the air, and that warmed air circulates slowly through the house. Now think about the physics of this arrangement. 8 human bodies, each generating roughly 100 watts of heat, equals 800 watts total. Add the cows, maybe another 3,000 watts combined. The chickens and pig contribute another few hundred watts. You're looking at nearly 4,000 watts of biological heat generation in a space of about 450 cubic feet. That's not enough to make it comfortable, not by modern standards. But it's enough to keep the air above freezing. It's enough to prevent hypothermia. It's enough to survive. And there's a beauty to it if you can see past the discomfort. 8 people who have chosen to share this space, this night, this struggle. They could be enemies. They could be competing for resources. But instead, they're cooperating. They're sharing warmth. They're surviving together. The sleeping order reflects medieval values. Protect the young, honor the old, contribute according to your ability. John takes the cold spot because he can. William shares his warmth with Agnes because she needs it. Alice keeps Tom close because that's what mothers do. There's no selfishness here. There can't be. Selfishness means someone freezes. Cooperation means everyone survives. As the night deepens, as the cold reaches its lowest point just before dawn, the bodies press closer together unconsciously. In sleep, humans seek warmth instinctively. An arm drapes over a sibling. A leg presses against a parent. The family becomes a single warm unit. Boundaries blurred, individual and collective survival merged into one. This is how humans evolved to sleep. Not alone in separate rooms with controlled temperatures, but together, in groups, sharing warmth and breath and space, creating safety through numbers. The medieval peasants didn't know they were following evolutionary imperatives. They just knew that sleeping together was warmer than sleeping alone. That proximity meant survival. That isolation meant death. And so they clustered, they nested, they created human warmth in the face of inhuman cold. The wind outside has quieted now. The deepest part of the night has passed. In maybe 3 hours, the first grey light of dawn will begin to seep through the cracks in the shutters. But for now, in this darkest hour, the family sleeps. 8 people breathing in rough rhythm. 2 cows chewing cud, 6 chickens roosting, 1 pig snoring, all of them creating warmth, sharing space, surviving the cold together. It's not comfortable, It's not clean. It's not anything close to what we'd accept today. But it works. They're alive. They're warm enough. They're together. And in the end, that's all that matters. Survival. Community. Warmth. The fire glows red under its blanket of ash. The darkness holds. The cold presses in but doesn't break through. They made it through another night. They're still here. The deepest part of the night has its own quality, its own stillness, its own peculiar peace. If you were awake now, if you opened your eyes in this darkness, you'd see nothing, but you'd feel everything. The weight of wool blankets, the scratch of straw underneath, the warmth of bodies pressed close, the slow rhythm of breathing all around you. This is the hour when the world seems to pause, when even the wind holds its breath, when the cold reaches its peak but stops pressing quite so hard, as if winter itself has exhausted its rage and settled into patient waiting. The fire has burned down to its smallest self, just coals under ash. But those coals hold tomorrow's warmth. They're the continuous thread of fire that will carry through to morning. They're not bright enough to see by, but they're alive, still burning, still fighting the cold in their own quiet way. Listen with me now to the sounds of this final hour. They're so soft you have to strain to hear them, but they're there. They're real. They're the sounds of life persisting through the longest night. And if you listen very carefully past the breathing of your own family, you can sometimes hear the village breathing with you. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once and falls silent. From another house comes the faint creak of a cradle rocking, a new mother soothing her baby. A horse snorts in its stable. Somewhere, an owl calls across the frozen fields. These are the quiet sounds of 40 families, all doing exactly what you are doing right now, keeping each other alive until morning. 8 people breathing, not in unison, but in a kind of organic symphony. John's breath is deep and slow, the breath of exhausted muscles finally at rest. William's has that slight whistle through his nose. Old Agnes wheezes a bit on the exhale, her old lungs working harder than they should. Alice breathes quietly, but you can hear her shift slightly when Tom stirs that mother's vigilance that never quite sleeps. The children breathe with the easy unconsciousness of youth. Margaret's breath is regular and soft. Robert occasionally snores, just a little, a boyish rumble that makes the chickens cluck in response. Little Tom makes small sounds in his sleep. Sometimes, when he's half awake and the world feels too big and cold, Tom does what all the children here learn to do. He counts his father's slow breaths against his back. 1, 2, 3, 4, until the steady rhythm pulls him under again. Dream noises, fragments of waking life playing out behind his eyes. And Emma, the 7-year-old, breathes with her mouth slightly open, a habit that drives her mother to distraction, but that can't be broken. The livestock add their own notes to this nighttime symphony. The cows breathe like bellows, massive and regular. One of them shifts her weight, and the straw rustles underneath her like rain on leaves. She exhales a long, patient sound, and you can almost feel the warm moisture of her breath adding to the air. The chickens are mostly quiet now, but occasionally one will cluck softly to herself, some chicken dream disturbing her rest. The pig snores a surprisingly loud rhythmic grunt that's actually comforting in its regularity. And beneath all of this, beneath the biological sounds, there's the house itself. Wood creaks as temperature changes make it contract. Straw settles. The thatched roof whispers when a breeze passes over it. These aren't threatening sounds. They're the sounds of shelter doing its job, holding back the cold, maintaining the fragile bubble of survivable space. Imagine the temperature map of this room right now. Close to the banked fire, maybe 45 degrees Fahrenheit. In the sleeping platform where 8 bodies are clustered under wool, maybe 50 degrees under the blankets, though the air around them is much colder. At the walls, touching freezing. Up near the roof where the smoke has warmed the thatch, maybe 40 degrees. Down at floor level, just above freezing. It's a patchwork of cold and less cold, not warmth and cold. There is no true warmth here, not by our standards. But there's enough. There's survival. There's life hanging on until morning. Outside the village is invisible in darkness. 40 other houses each with their own family, their own fire, their own struggle against the cold. You can't see them. You can't hear them. But they're there, surviving in their own way, making it through the night in parallel, each family a small island of warmth in the vast ocean of winter darkness. The church stands at the center of the village stone and solid its own kind of cold. No fire burns there at night. No people sleep in its shelter. But it's a presence, nonetheless, a reminder of community, of faith, of something larger than individual survival. Come morning, its bell will ring, calling people to day and to prayer. But now, in the deepest night, it's silent, waiting. The fields beyond the village lie frozen and empty. The strips of land that will be ploughed come spring, that will grow the grain to feed these families. They're just sleeping now under their blanket of snow, dormant, conserving energy, waiting for warmth to return. The forest at the edge of the fields is black against slightly less black sky. Bare branches like cracks in darkness. No leaves to whisper. No movement except the wind through branches. The forest is sleeping too in its own way. Trees dormant, animals denned or gone. All the life that thrives in summer compressed down to its essential core, just survival, just waiting. And above it all, if the clouds have cleared stars. So many stars. More stars than we ever see now with our light pollution and our street lamps. The medieval sky on a clear night is a riot of light, the Milky Way, visible as a river of stars planets, bright enough to cast shadows, constellations, so clear you could understand why people saw stories written in them. There was a specific practical use for this starlight too. To the medieval peasant, the sky was a clock and a calendar. Without mechanical timepieces, John looks through the cracks in the shutters or steps briefly outside to relieve himself, and he reads the position of the Great Bear, the Ursa Major. As the constellation rotates around the pole star, it marks the passing of the night watches. The bear is low, he might think, knowing he has hours of sleep left. The bear is climbing, means dawn is approaching. This connection to the celestial mechanics gave them a sense of order. The night wasn't just an endless void. It was a mechanism that was turning inevitably towards morning. It provided a sense of control. The cold might be chaotic, the wind might be wild, but the stars were disciplined soldiers marching across the sky, assuring him that the sun would eventually return. But the stars are cold. Beautiful, but cold. They give light, but no warmth. They're a reminder of how small this house is, how fragile this bubble of human warmth in the vast, cold universe. Inside the house, Tom stirs. He's cold. His little body has burned through its reserves, and he's starting to wake with that distress that children feel when they're uncomfortable. But before he can fully wake, before he can cry, Alice's arm draws him closer. She shifts her body, creating more warmth around him, and whispers something too soft to hear. Mother sounds, comfort sounds. And Tom settles again, soothed back into sleep, without ever fully waking. This happens dozens of times each night. Small moments of care. Someone gets cold and shifts. Someone else unconsciously shares more warmth. The family as organisms self-regulating, keeping everyone alive through tiny acts of adjustment and care. Margaret dreams of spring. She doesn't know she's dreaming, but her sleeping mind has gone forward in time, past this cold past, this hunger to green fields and warm sun and flowers. Her dreams are an escape and a promise. Spring will come. It always does. You just have to survive long enough to see it. Robert dreams of food. Bread fresh from the oven, still warm, slathered with butter. Roasted pork with crispy skin. Apples from the autumn harvest, sweet and juicy. His stomach rumbles even in sleep, and his dreams are a kind of torture and comfort combined. Old Agnes doesn't dream much anymore. Her sleep is lighter broken by discomfort and the needs of an aging body. She lies there in the darkness, not quite awake, but not deeply asleep, either listening to the sounds of her family counting her blessings. She's still here, still alive, still part of this. Her bones ache with cold, but her heart is warm with gratitude. She's seen so much death in her 70 years. Every night she survives feels like a gift. John's sleep is deep but troubled. He dreams of fields that won't drain of seed, that won't sprout of a harvest that never comes. His subconscious knows what's coming, even if his waking mind hasn't fully processed it. The famine is just beginning. Next winter will be worse. But tonight in sleep, all he can do is dream his anxieties and hope the morning brings solutions. And now, finally, as the night reaches its deepest point, as the cold touches its coldest, something shifts. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but it's there. The quality of darkness begins to change. Not lighter yet, but different. And with this shift comes the dawn chorus, but not the birds. Not yet. It's the sound of the village waking up to the realization that they haven't frozen. It starts with the breaking of the ice. Almost simultaneously, in 40 houses, you would hear the dull thwack-thwack of wooden mallets hitting the water barrels. The surface has frozen 3 inches thick during the night. It must be broken to get water for the morning porridge. That sound, wood on ice, is the heartbeat of the medieval winter morning. It is the sound of victory. It says, "The ice tried to take the water, but we took it back." Then the sounds of doors unbarring. The wood is swollen with damp and cold, so the doors groan and protest. The first rush of air that enters is shockingly fresh, scrubbing the stale, smoky, animal-scented air of the night out of the room. It's a violent transition. You go from the warm, fetid cocoon of the sleep pile to the sharp, biting clarity of the morning in seconds. It wakes the brain instantly. There is no need for coffee when the air temperature in your kitchen is 15 degrees. Thinner somehow. The absolute blackness of deep night, beginning its slow transformation toward the grey of pre-dawn. This is the turning point. The moment when winter's grip begins to loosen just slightly. Not much. Not enough to matter in any practical sense. But symbolically, metaphorically, it matters enormously. They've made it. They've survived the night. The coldest hours have passed. In another 2 hours, maybe 3, John will wake for his final watching hour. He'll scrape the ash away from the coals. He'll add kindling. He'll blow gently until flames appear. He'll feed the fire until it's strong enough to warm the house. And then the day will begin. But right now, in this final deep moment before dawn, there's peace. There's the peace of survival earned, the peace of community maintained, the peace of warmth shared and cold held at bay. The house breathes. The family breathes. The livestock breathe. 8 humans, 2 cows, 6 chickens, 1 pig, all breathing together in the darkness, all alive, all still here. They didn't just survive this night. They survived the winter so far. They survived the famine. They survived the cold and the hunger and the darkness and the fear. They survived together, as families have survived for countless generations before them. And they'll survive tomorrow too. And the day after that. And all the days until spring finally comes and the world warms again and life becomes a little easier, a little less precarious. But even then, even in the abundance of spring and summer, they'll remember these nights. These cold nights when survival was everything, when warmth was precious, when community was life itself. They'll remember and they'll be grateful. Grateful for fire, for wool, for straw, for the warmth of bodies pressed close, for the gift of another dawn. As you drift toward your own sleep, now safe in your warm bed, separated by centuries from that cold night in 1315, take a moment to feel gratitude too, for the warmth you have, for the security you feel, for all the generations of humans who survived cold nights so that you could be here now. You are the descendant of survivors. Everyone is. You carry their resilience in your bones, their strength in your blood, their will to survive in your very existence. The cold night passes. It always does. Morning always comes. Life persists. And we're still here, all of us, still surviving. Still finding warmth in the darkness, still making it through one more night. The fire glows red. The darkness holds. The family sleeps. And beyond the walls past the village, across the frozen fields, the first imperceptible hint of dawn begins to gather at the edge of the world. They made it. We made it. Humanity made it through this night and countless nights before, and all the nights to come. Sleep now, sleep warm, sleep safe, and dream of spring. Hello again. It's Peter Miller. If you're still here with me, if you've made this whole journey through that long medieval night, I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for caring about these stories of human survival and resilience. We've traveled together through the coldest hours. We've felt the wind and the hunger and the darkness that our ancestors faced every winter. We've learned their tricks for survival. We've understood their fears and their hopes. We've seen how they made it through one more night and another, until spring finally came. But more than that, I hope you've felt something. Some connection to those people across the centuries. Some appreciation for how hard life used to be, and how much easier we have it now. Some gratitude for the warmth and safety and abundance that most of us take for granted. Because here's the truth, we stand on the shoulders of survivors. Every person listening to this, your ancestors survived winters that would kill most of us in days. They survived famines and plagues and wars and disasters. They survived because they had to, because the alternative was death, and because something in the human spirit refuses to give up. That spirit is in you too. That resilience, that strength. that will to survive no matter what. You might not need it in the same way they did. You might never face a January night in a drafty cottage with nothing but straw and wool between you and freezing. But the strength is there inherited, passed down through your bloodline, ready if you ever need it. And in a way, that's what these stories are for. They are also a reminder that comfort is a very new, very fragile experiment. For 99% of human history, we were cold, we were hungry, we were in the dark. The fact that you can reach out and turn a dial to make summer appear in your living room is a magic that John and Alice would have considered divine. But there is a loss too. We have lost the profound, bone-deep relief of the thaw. We don't know the ecstasy of the first warm day in March because we haven't truly felt the bite of January. We live in a flat line of temperature. They lived in a landscape of peaks and valleys. Their suffering was higher, but perhaps their joy was sharper too. When the sun finally hit their faces after a week of grey storms, they didn't just feel warmth, they felt salvation. Not just entertainment or education, though they're both of those things. But reminders. Reminders of what humans are capable of. Reminders that we're stronger than we think. Reminders that community and cooperation and care for each other are what let us survive when the world turns hostile. The medieval peasants in their cold house. Anne Boleyn in her cold cell. The patriots in cold Boston Harbor. The people of ancient Corral in their cold desert nights. They're all part of our story. They're all part of what made us who we are. So as you drift off to sleep, now warm and comfortable and safe, carry that story with you. Let it comfort you. Let it inspire you. Let it remind you that you come from people who survived impossible things. And tomorrow, when you wake up warm and rested, maybe take a moment to appreciate it. The central heating, the soft mattress, the electric lights, the abundance of food, all the things that make our lives so much easier than the lives of everyone who came before. Because appreciation is the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is what we gain when we truly understand the past. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about these cold nights and the people who survived them. I'm Peter Miller, and I'm so glad you joined me for tonight's journey. And somewhere in the great chain of nights that stretches from that little house in 1315 all the way to your bedroom tonight, someone who survived that cold is still watching over your sleep, grateful that you are warm. Sleep well, sleep warm, and I'll see you next time. Good night.